So, I was on this flight to Seattle. Everything's normal for the first part of the flight. But then, this guy a few rows up starts to act real strange. He begins by just looking out the window, but it's intense, like he's searching for something out there in the clouds. After a while, he starts shifting in his seat, looking around the cabin. He's mumbling to himself, and it's clear he's not okay. He stands up and begins pacing the aisle. He walks up and down a few times, looking at other passengers, the wings of the plane, the flight attendants, like he's expecting something to go wrong at any second. His face is pale, his eyes are wide, and he's sweating, even though the cabin's cool. People start to notice, whispering to each other, looking scared. Then he starts talking, first to himself and then out loud. He's saying he's hearing voices, not through the speakers, but directly in his head. Says that these voices are warning him about something I didn't understand. He's frantic, and it's obvious he believes every word he's saying. At this point, a couple of passengers try to calm him down, telling him it's going to be okay. Maybe it's just stress or a bad dream. But he's not having it. He keeps saying we're all in danger, that these voices are telling him something terrible's about to happen. The flight attendants come over, trying to handle the situation. They're professional, but you can tell they're worried. This isn't your usual passenger disturbance. They talk to him, asking him to sit down, but he's pacing faster now, almost in a panic. That's when the plane hits turbulence. It's rough, jolting everyone around. This guy screams, saying this is what the voices warned him about. He's shouting that we need to turn back, that something awful is waiting for us if we keep going. It's chaos for a moment. People are scared. The cabin's a mix of crying and shouts. The flight attendants are trying to get everyone seated, but this guy's still on about the voices and the danger. Then, as quickly as it started, the turbulence stops. Everything's calm again. And the guy, he just collapses into his seat, quiet as a ghost. He doesn't say another word for the rest of the flight, just stares out the window. It was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen. The rest of the flight, everyone was whispering about it, trying to figure out what happened. I saw him being led away by some airport staff. He looked lost, confused, like he couldn't quite grasp what had just happened. I've always been a logical person, never one to believe in ghost stories or things that go bump in the night. But what happened to me on that long-haul flight shook my very understanding of reality. It was a routine flight, one I had taken countless times before. We were flying over the Atlantic. I had a window seat, which I usually enjoyed for the view, but that night, the outside world was nothing but darkness. As the hours went by, I started to feel unease. I had tried to ignore it, but then came the scratching, but it was so faint that I thought I'd imagined it. It grew louder, like someone clawing desperately at the plane's exterior. I looked out of the window into the darkness. That's when I saw it. A figure, human in shape but horribly distorted, clinging to the side of the plane. Its eyes glowed an unnatural shade, piercing through the night like twin beacons. Its mouth moved rapidly, like if it was trying to communicate with me. I got paralyzed by fear so much I couldn't even scream. The figure's fingers scraped against the window. That sound sent shivers down my spine. I hit the call button, desperate for someone else to see this impossibility. A flight attendant arrived. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked. I pointed to the window with my shaking hand, but when I looked again, the figure was gone. The attendant gave me a sympathetic look, no doubt thinking I'd had a nightmare or something. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I spent the rest of the flight wide awake, jumping at every sound and every time the plane moved. Then the scratching returned for a moment only to disappear again. It happened a few more times more, that's why I know that what I saw was not a dream. When we finally landed, I was the first to disembark, eager to feel solid ground beneath my feet, and put as much distance between me and that plane as possible. But even now, 2 years later, I find myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing eyes in the darkness. I've tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was all in my head. But deep down, I know what I saw was real. And the most terrifying part? I have no explanation for it. No logical reason for how something could have been out there, clinging to the plane in the dead of night. That experience has left me with more questions than answers. What was that figure? What should I think about all of that? I'm scared to fly again since that flight. I was on this flight from Sydney to LA, right? The plane wasn't packed, which was nice because everyone got a bit more room to stretch out. It was one of those older planes, a bit noisy, but nothing too bad. Everything was going smooth until this really strange thing happened. Across the aisle, there was this guy, David. At first glance, he seemed like just another passenger, maybe a bit tense, but nothing out of the ordinary. As the hours passed, though, he started acting weird. He was all fidgety, kept glancing nervously at the seat next to him, which was completely empty. He looked genuinely spooked, like he was seeing something terrifying. I'm not the kind to ignore someone in distress, so I thought I'd try and talk to him, you know? See if I could help him relax a bit. He told me he was coming back from a business trip, but he couldn't take his eyes off the empty seat. He leaned in close and whispered that he was seeing this shadowy figure sitting there, murmuring things he couldn't make out. I figured maybe he was just messing with me, or perhaps the stress was getting to him. But then, I kid you not, I started seeing it too. It was like a shadow, or some kind of ghostly figure just sitting there in the seat. It made no sense at all. I hit the call button for a flight attendant, thinking maybe they could help sort this out. But the craziest thing happened. As soon as the attendant arrived, both David and that eerie, shadowy figure just disappeared. Poof, gone. The attendant looked at me like I was pulling a prank or something. She even said the seat had been empty since we boarded. For the rest of the flight, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My eyes kept darting back to that empty seat. I was trying to figure out if I was losing my mind. Was David a ghost or something? Did I imagine it all? It was the most bizarre experience ever. I kept replaying it over in my head, trying to make sense of it. Where did David go? How could he just vanish into thin air like that? And what was up with that shadow thing? As soon as the plane landed in LA, I was one of the first off. I just needed to get away from that plane. The whole thing stayed with me, nagging at the back of my mind. I still think about that flight sometimes. What really happened? Was it all in my head? Or was there something more to it? It's one of those experiences that you just can't shake. A reminder that sometimes the world is a lot stranger than we believe.